I've noticed that I'm usually much younger than like the vendor's other contacts, and I'm probably one of the only people willing to do this. A lot of the time they see my WeChat, it says Dongguan Shenzhen, and they think I'm like in China talking to them, and I have to be like, no, I'm in Pittsburgh.
Hello and welcome to the Open Hardware Manufacturing Podcast, the podcast about making open source hardware. My name is Stephen Hawes.
And I'm Lucian Chapar.
And today we are talking about what actually goes into launching a hardware product. When you are trying to actually start shipping the thing and putting it in a box and sending it out the door, it is not just the engineering. There's a ton of other little weaselly things that sneak their way onto your agenda that need to happen before you're ready to start shipping.
Yeah, there really is a ton to unpack here, and it's going to touch on many of our previous episodes. And like, this is a really good snapshot into how Steven and I are thinking about launching like the next version of the Lumen.
Yep.
So,
when we wrote out the outline for this episode, it was about 4 pages long. So this is actually going to be our first 2-parter. In this first episode, we're going to get into how we do planning broadly, and then kind of like the first half of the type of tasks that need to happen to get ready for launch. And then in the next episode, the follow-up one, we're going to get into kind of the other half of tasks that need to happen for launch. And what does launch day look like? What are you doing on launch day? How does that go? What goes into that whole process? So yeah, this is our first 2-parter. This is a very long record.
and Opula has done launches of products many times now, so we have a pretty good sense of what's important, what's optional, and like we're happy to be able to share this with y'all.
Yep. We also, this is pretty freaking cool. We have been doing this podcast for a year. This is, a year ago today, as of when we're recording this, our first episode had just come out. That's crazy. That's super wild. So a tremendous thank you to everyone that has listened and sent us comments on the podcast at opula.io, the email address, like sending us feedback and episode suggestions in our Discord. It has been such an incredible thing hearing from y'all, and like it's been so fun to record these and have Lucian and myself bark at each other for an hour and change every couple of weeks. It's been a total blast. So yeah, we're excited to have in year 2.
Yeah, and everyone listening, you're part of this, so help us keep this going.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening.
All right, you ready to get into it?
Let's do it. All right, so in order to get a actual physical product out of the door and be prepared for all the other stuff that needs to go along with that, you have to do a million little things. And here's my analogy. It's like Thanksgiving dinner, where call time is 7:30. Everything's got to be hot. You got to have the turkey done cooking. You got to have your cranberry sauce. You got to have your stuffing. Has got to be ready. It all has to like end at that time. And that's your equivalent of launch day. But like, you need to put the turkey in at 10 a.m. that day. You need to leave bread out to get stale overnight the night before. You got to get some of these things burning early so that everything coalesces to 7:30 p.m. Thursday, Thanksgiving. You got to figure out what do you need to do first to like have all your dependencies line up for call time. That's kind of how I think about it.
Right. And like, as we see all the time, there's certain tasks that need to get kicked off early. So they're running in the background so that 6 to 8 week lead time doesn't really affect you.
Yeah. And like updating your website to have the new product page is like kind of the cranberry sauce where it can happen 15 minutes before the table is plated. Like you got a lot of other longer burn things that got to start way quicker than that, like way before that, I should say. So the real trick is like getting all of these things, like knowing what is the longest lead time thing, which things have the most dependencies, and starting on those first too. So it unblocks you to work on all the other things or let other people work on those things. The first thing before we get into like all the stuff that kind of goes into getting a hardware thing out the door and doing a launch is the planning. And okay, so there's a quote that is kind of how we think about it a lot, which is plans are worthless, but planning is everything, which is an Eisenhower quote. The idea is like you need to plan, but like it's not going to survive first contact with reality. Like it's immediately going to crumble apart, and that's okay. But you still have to go through the exercise of planning. Because the point is not to have a plan you follow. It's to understand what you have to do.
Yeah, it's aligning the team more than everything.
Yes.
More than anything.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And getting all those tasks in one place where everyone can see the entire scope of what's necessary before you're ready to like list it and sell the thing.
Right. And I've seen projects where their schedule is ironclad. It's not allowed to slip and they suffer for it.
Yeah. And slipping is different than it changing. Yeah. Right. Because like things, sometimes there's nothing you can do and things slip. Like life happens, right? Like you still have to be able to account for that. But some things get done quicker, some things get done slower. Like what we do is we reassess at least once a week where we sit down and we're like, all right, what do we have left? How do we do on those things? Can we check anything off? Is there any new things that we forgot about? And just kind of check in. But also we are constantly updating it throughout the course of the week as we're changing stuff and getting things done or remembering new things we have to do. It's gonna never be perfect, and that's okay. I think is an important thing to say about kind of prepping for this stuff.
Yeah, there's a famous metric called D factor, which is how close your estimate to like launch was to being correct as it changed over time.
Right.
The fun one.
What's it called again?
D factor.
D factor?
Don't know what the D stands for.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I have heard about this before, but I've never utilized it really.
Yeah, it came up at like a retro for a Form 3 product launch.
Okay.
Once, and the product manager, Christian Reed, brought it to my attention. It's a really cool metric.
Interesting.
It shows how close you were to being right. And
yeah. And that probably helps a lot for like future estimates of how long you expect stuff to take.
Yeah.
You can use that as a multiplier for like, well, I know I'm always under by about 15% on time. I should add that on top.
For sure.
Interesting.
But yeah, it's important to plan. It doesn't need to be immutable.
Yes, it's going to change. It's not going to be what happens. And I also think there's the phrase of work gets done in the time you have to do it in is kind of true too. Like, and even true for yourself. Like if you give yourself a deadline and a timeline, it helps a lot to follow that. You know, if we're just like, oh, we're going to launch it when we're ready. Stuff slips. Like having a day helps so much. It's like dinner is served whenever it's ready. It's like, no, I need to plan around when do I put the turkey in the oven. I'm going to really stretch the hell out of this analogy in this episode. I need to know when to put the turkey in the oven based on that time is determined by when we're all going to sit down for dinner.
Right. And
like you have to know.
The machine can always be more ready.
Yes.
Like the product you could always make it more better.
Mm-hmm.
But having the metrics in place to define like when is launch and like when does it need to happen by.
Yep.
Very critical for keeping the team go in the right direction at the right pace.
Yep. Yeah. 100%. And like, I know, especially for some of our earlier launches, like we were way off on our estimate. And I think we're much better now. I think we're a lot closer to like understanding actually how long stuff's going to take. We've gotten quite a bit better, but our early estimates were like truly hilarious.
Yeah, like these days the launch feels routine, but I think the BYOP, the DIY Lumen kit took months longer than we expected.
Yeah, I think our first estimate, we were shy by 3 months. And then to be safe, we said, we'll launch by the end of Q1. And we launched mid-February. So we were actually 6 weeks ahead of what we said, but we knew the whole time we were shooting for mid-Feb. But we kind of bought ourselves 6 extra weeks of like, oh no, what if we can't do it in time? But we did, we landed it. That was handy. I'm glad we did that.
Yeah, packaging ended up being a real slowdown there.
Yeah.
That was a big one. And just assurance that the board is the right one, I believe it was.
Yeah. Yeah, those are the things that are the long burns when you're working with another vendor, you know, and we'll get into some of those things too. Like, oh man, those are the ones that can really nuke a timeline big time. Same thing with feeders. We had a scare about shipping on time with feeders because of packaging. Dude, that was stressful. That was a lot.
Yeah, I don't think the packaging was in hand on launch day, but we knew it would be like a week later or something like that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we had samples we knew were good or something like that.
Yeah, if there's a new vendor in the supply chain or like something new to like the product, definitely err on the side of caution.
Yeah. Yep. Give it an extra 2 weeks at least.
Or start it first.
Yeah. It should. Yeah. Those are the first ones you kick off.
Yeah,
for sure. Something that I in particularly really like, and I think it correct me if I'm wrong, if this isn't also really helpful for you, but I love Gantt charts. And for those of you who aren't familiar, a Gantt chart is like a visual representation. It's kind of like on a linear grid from left to right of how long a task is going to take. Gantt charts exist in like every kind of project management software. I have some in Notion. We use GitHub projects. Again, Gantt chart support in there. I love seeing like visually how long a thing is going to take and looking at the timeline of tasks visually and laying it out visually is so helpful. Do you get that same kind of benefit from it, or is just like a list fine for you too?
We're quite different. Like,
yeah.
I don't really keep personal notes so much. I just kind of juggle in my head. But I do like to have the Gantt chart because I know not everyone's that same way.
Yeah.
And like if I ever stall out, I'm like, okay, what do I need to do right now? Like, it's a great thing to go back to. Like it's imperative.
Yep. Yep.
And like the more complicated a project gets with the more team members involved, the more required it really is.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if there are some things, this is why I really like the dependency thing too. If like we get into this in a little bit later, but you can't take the hero photos of the product until you have one. Like you need one of them, and like it has to look like what you're going to ship, or at least 99% the way you're going to ship it. Mm-hmm. You can't make docs until you have one. You can't shoot your product video till you have one that looks perfect. So like getting one of those in first, that now unlocks all those other tasks to happen. And like if those are different people, different teams, they need to be prepped on when they have the materials, they need to do that thing. And like being able to see where those dependencies are and how, this thing got pushed a week. All of these dependencies also got pushed a week. It's so good to see how these things impact each other.
I think what I find the most use in a Gantt chart is the sequencing, and like at the early onset of planning, deciding what happens first and that sequence of tasks with an eye for like shaving time, reducing risk, and like hitting your launch date. Like, being aware of like, okay, actually realizing that the website can't really be affected before the thing is built with the hero machine. Like being able to arrange the pieces and think about how to use the teams like time available most effectively is the meta. Yeah. Because like I acknowledge that the schedule is not going to be what I expect it to be. So it's really more about the order than like the date to me a lot of the time.
Yeah. I agree with you. It really is kind of mostly it's an exercise in dependencies. And the date kind of comes out from this. So like when we drop, what we do is we drop in all the tasks and then we start laying out the order that they have to happen in and about how long they'll take and assigning all those dependencies. And then we kind of see where that puts us. Like we'll do this at the beginning of like, okay, the engineering kind of is coming to a wrap. Like now let's start thinking about when this is going to get out the door. Like maybe still some engineering left. We can kind of start to solidify this. And then we see generally where it looks like we're going to land. We add a buffer. We set that date. Mm-hmm. And one of the best things about this is it's mainly you and me in this Gantt chart. And we assign the tasks to each other. And we have a view in this where we can see how many things are on Steven's plate, how many things are on Lucian's plate. And it really helps us like, Lucian has 18 tasks next week and Steven has 3. Maybe the non-critical Lucian task should go into Steven's plate next week and help balance that kind of thing out. And, it might push things along a little bit, but it's impossible for you to get 18 huge tasks done in a week. Like that's just not feasible. So, it helps a lot to kind of see what the load is on each person too.
Yeah. The more like agile, I know it's a big buzzword, a team is, like the more you can actually understand what that load is. Like when I was at Mastercam, there'd be you understood like per hour, like what each task might take.
Right.
And
yeah.
Like you'd estimate it as a team too. It was pretty precise.
Yeah. We are way more loosey-goosey than that, but we're doing effectively the same thing. Mm-hmm. Like you and I sit down and we're like, how long would it take to do this? And it's like in terms of like half week increments. Is like, is this going to take me 2 to 3 days? Is it going to take me 7 days? Is it going to take me, 10 days? It's like that kind of rough scale.
Yeah.
And that's good enough because so many other things happen that we can't prepare for.
I've had to get good at understanding or estimating how long like a PCB or like a software change would take. And I'm not an electronics guy.
Yeah.
or programmer.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah. Although and like even just of the time we've been working together at Opulo, I've seen how your estimation gets way better. Like sometimes you'll ask me to make a change. You're like, I think this is going to be an easy one. Or you'll be like, I think this is going to send you on a roller coaster of time. And normally you're right. Sometimes it's like completely off for a reason I totally wouldn't expect you to know. And like you found out how that estimate works way better, I think. It's pretty cool. And I am still always wrong with how long I guess it will take for you to make a jig. It's always about as much time as I think it will.
Yeah,
be.
you think it's this big daunting thing. I was like, no.
And you're like, dude, I will make this in 4 hours and we'll use it for thousands of units. Like I'll make it very quickly. It'll be right.
Yeah, we got a new one we're excited to talk about later. It's really fun looking.
Yes. Oh yeah. It's my favorite object in the building right now.
Yeah.
It's so cool. Yeah. So, a lot of this is going to change as you do more of this and the more that you estimate. You're going to get better at knowing how long it's going to take you to do things. We're in the middle of prepping for a launch right now, and we've done 3 big ones. We have a lot of little releases all the time when we make a GitHub update, but in terms of like product launch, new video, whatever, we've done 3. So we've done this before. We know how long it takes us to do certain things. Like we're much better at estimating it now. So you're going to get it super wrong the first time, and that's so chill. Just give yourself a little buffer. Don't be any more precise than a quarter increment of when you're going to ship. And shoot for the beginning of that. Have your launch day be the beginning of that quarter. Give yourself an extra quarter of buffer. Like that's for your first crack at it. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
It doesn't hurt.
It doesn't hurt. Yeah.
No.
You're going to be wrong. It's fine.
And if being wrong is like not allowed, understand like what you may need to do to manifest your like date. Like if you have to launch at CES, then like understand what it would take to manifest that if things go awry.
Right. Yeah. My old boss at Formlabs, Jake, great dude. He's I love this line. He has this bit about like project management. And he's like, with anything, there are 3 knobs. Any project only has 3 knobs. It's scope, resources, and timeline. Those are the only 3 knobs you have. If you have limited resources and a lot of scope, you need to extend your timeline. Like one of those goes down, the other ones have to go up to accommodate that. And like, that's it. That's as simple as it is. If you need to ship by CES, can we reduce our scope? Can we get more headcount? That's all you have. Those are the only other 2 knobs. I think about that all the time.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting way to look at it. Obviously, there's more nuance, but like that's not a bad way to view the problem. So, yeah, you got to do what you got to do to make that happen by CES if that's what you got on your plate. Yeah,
caffeine pills.
Yeah, staying up all night might be maybe that's the 4th knob. Staying up all night.
Borrowed time.
What'd you say?
Borrowed time.
Borrowed time. Yeah. Yep. But you have a limited resource of that.
Yeah. It's just like was it Need for Speed? You have overdrive. And it's like you have 10 seconds of it.
Yeah. What a specific video game pull. I love it.
I might be thinking of Crazy Taxi arcade game, but
I don't think Crazy Taxi has a turbo. Does it? I don't think it does.
Someone in the comments let us know.
Yeah. Man, I haven't thought about Crazy Taxi in years. What a great game.
Yeah.
So
that's planning. Like, there's a lot more that could be said. We've talked about it before, but
yeah,
like this whole episode's gonna kind of flip through a lot of our topics and put it all together.
Yep. Yeah, it really is. I think there's a bullet point here where we literally say, go listen to this episode instead, because we did a whole episode on one of these. But yeah, so you should make a plan, reference it at least weekly, probably every day. I look at my plan every single day for what's left for burn down of what we got to do before shipping. But now let's get into the meat of the thing, which is like, what are all the things you actually have to do to launch? Like what goes into a hardware launch? I think we have like 24 things here or something. Like there's a lot of individual separate things. The first one is engineering. So, and this literally encapsulates every single aspect of R&D, design, engineering that exists in the product. And that's 1 out of like 20.
Yes. Turns out that's like a small part in the grand scheme.
Yeah. Like so much of getting a thing out the door is not designing it.
Yeah.
There's so many other things that go into that.
Steve and I have a great joke of like the engineering is the easy part.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like that's not taking it for granted. It's just kind of how it feels.
It's what we're good at. It's such a small part of it. And this is also why like a bit of a different topic here, but you know, people are like, aren't you afraid someone's going to steal your design if it's open source? It's like, that's 1/20th of this equation. Like, you know what I mean? Like whatever.
Yeah. At this point, like, sure, go copy it. We're years ahead of you.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's these other 19 things we have sorted. And also cool. You make it and then you're helping the ecosystem grow too. Also great.
Based.
Like whatever. Totally off topic, but I just have to drop this in here. It's like engineering is a small part of what makes a hardware product go out.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so this is just everything needs to be designed, roughly working, generally doing what it needs to do.
And I think we're at a good stopping point for Steven to read a quick ad from today's sponsor.
Yes, thank you, Lucian. Today's episode sponsor is PCBWay. PCBWay is a fantastic prototyping service for getting excellent PCBs turned around really quickly. When we're going through an R&D process and we're trying to get a board in our product in really quickly so that we can validate it and we can move on to the next step in production like we've been talking about in this episode, getting those boards in quick is so unbelievably important. And PCBWay has been a fantastic partner with us for getting those boards in of excellent quality that we know we're ready to move on to the next step in our production. Thank you so much to PCBWay for sponsoring this episode.
So like after you have the engineering figured out, you know what you want the machine to be, you know what sensors and equipment it's going to include, you need to find the vendors for it.
Yeah.
And like for us, we're talking about a change from one version of the Lumen to another, like getting the next V4 ready.
Yep.
So like, luckily it's an exercise in finding the new features and like getting the current vendors to make something a little bit different than they might have otherwise.
Yep.
But in this section of like getting ready for launch, it's spending a lot of time talking to a lot of people and waiting for a lot of samples to come in.
Yeah.
For me, I was up till 6 a.m. today. I slept in till 2, strolled into the office, cracked a Red Bull, and now we're doing the podcast.
Now we're recording an episode.
Yeah.
I woke up and I saw your message as you were going to bed. I was like, Lucian posted 1 hour ago. And he's like, all right, I'm going to bed, guys. And I'm like waking up for my day. It was crazy, dude.
Yeah, during the DIY kit days, like Steven and I had opposite schedules and we'd overlap for like 3 hours.
Yeah.
Because there's so many new vendors to talk to.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just constant.
Everything was new. There was no vendor for anything.
Yep. Yeah. It was all brand spanking new. And if nothing's super time urgent, you can send them a message when it's nighttime for them and they get back to you, but you only get one volley a day of back and forth a day. So if it's not super time pressing, like reordering stuff, yeah, whatever, that's fine. But when you're trying to work out like engineering specs of a part, we can't wait that long. Like it takes too much time.
Yeah. I've found that with a lot of our vendors, if I at 5 p.m. just emailed them a book of requirements, it's not going to be perceived the right way, or they're not going to catch every detail I cared about. So I get a lot more traction out of like real-time conversation where I hit them with requirement by requirement after confirming step by step what I need is doable.
Right. Because both of you will learn a little bit about the capabilities or requirements of the other one as you go through bit by bit. So it might obviate the need to share one thing with them based on what they say or something like that.
Yeah. And like it can be frustrating, but the vendor just wants to get to the next conversation with the next customer.
Yeah.
So like I almost just drip feed our requirements in some ways.
Interesting.
Because otherwise they try. Sounds good.
Yeah. It's a wall of text.
Tab, yeah.
Yeah.
And like to their credit, the person speaking English to me is not always an engineer.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. They're usually an English major from like a decent university. And I have to make sure I'm communicating myself correctly for that like level of education. And I make sure I say, ask your engineer this.
Yeah. And then they'll say, all right, cool. Let me communicate with the engineer about it. And that's also what's really nice about it is, you know, if you're up in the middle of the night, you'll kick off a requirement, maybe like we need this. And then they'll talk to the engineer and they come back an hour later and with that information there. And then you can pick up from that point, which is pretty cool.
A lot of product I forget who said this, but like follow the sun development. Like we kind of did it at Opula.
Yeah. I've never heard that before. Follow the sun.
Yeah. It's like keep someone on planet Earth working on your stuff during like waking sun hours, like at all times.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I'm now seeing this on Wikipedia. Knowledge product is owned in advance by a production site in one time zone and handed off at the end of their workday to the next production site that is several time zones west to continue that work.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
That's kind of how I think about it. I need to make sure the vendors have what they need at all hours to keep processing our needs.
Yep.
So at Formlabs, I was always impressed. There was someone on our team awake at all hours of the day. Yeah. Because we had people, many continents. It can be just me here. That's okay.
At least for now.
Yeah. I cannot wait to have a sourcer or a buyer.
Yeah. You poor guy. You've been really burning some late nights over the past like month and a half, 2 months.
It's okay though. It's like what we have to do. It's what anyone listening going through is what I recommend doing.
Yep. Especially
if you're mid-scale. Like, if we were Toyota, they would be up all night talking to us, but we're not Toyota.
Yep. So, and I remember I think we actually did a YouTube video about sourcing. And in that you were like, it's also like a way of showing like respect of like, no, I'm going out of my way to be up when you're up. And I think there's a lot of value in that of like, of facilitating it that way. I think that's a cool way to almost like an olive branch of like, hey, I'm going to play it by your time zone. I understand, what you're doing and I'm trying to make this easier for you.
Yeah. I've noticed that I'm usually much younger than like the vendors' other contacts. And I'm probably one of the only people willing to do this. They a lot of the time they see my WeChat says Dongguan Shenzhen. And they think I'm like in China talking to them. And I have to be like, no, I'm in Pittsburgh.
That also means that if you're an active thread burning throughout the day, you're going to get their attention when they're awake, which is great. I mean, talk about a way to push things forward. Just stay up all night. Sleep during the day, stay up all night. One of our guys, whenever you posted in Mattermost and you're like, hey guys, I'm coming in by this time, I was up super late or whatever, he always reacts with the vampire emoji because you're just nocturnal for this period of time.
I think a high level detail I'd say about this too is like, just like with the Gantt chart and planning, like keeping the vendors going, it's the outside stuff first.
Yes. Yeah. You've been saying this recently. I really like this mentality of outside stuff first. You and I can get grubby and just bang through anything that we have to here at Opula. Like it's within our power to just make stuff happen. Yeah. But outside stuff, we do not have power over.
I don't have leverage. Yeah. I cannot convince someone to rush. Yeah. Like, sure, I could offer them an expedite fee, but I don't want to do that to every single person at all times. It's going to exhaust me. It's going to exhaust them. It's going to make no one want to work with us. It'll make their average quote for like a regular fee, a regular part at a normal production rate cost more. Yeah. Because I don't want to be annoying to them.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Outside stuff first.
Yeah.
That's such a great line. I love that perspective on it.
It's been handy.
Yep.
And like risky stuff first, outside stuff first.
Yes. Single source stuff first. Like, there's only one vendor if it's like the only game in town for this thing, or like you're getting it custom made at a place. Like packaging's a good example of this too. Like you're getting it custom made with a place. If you are, that's you're betting on that horse. You can't diversify. You don't have optionality there really. I mean, you could, but it would be egregiously expensive.
Yeah.
Like you kind of just have to shepherd that one along.
Yeah. We did this right and wrong for V4. The first example is the cables. Mm-hmm. We first contacted people in like May.
Yeah.
And we had samples in hand like June 1st.
Yeah.
We took our sweet time communicating what needed to change about samples. And now they've been in production for 4 weeks and we'll have them soon.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, that's great.
It was a weird request. It's a super complicated harness. And it gives the vendor time to make it right and ensure quality. Mm-hmm. Cameras have been a little bit of a different story. We thought it would be a little bit simpler.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's been taking up a very large percentage of your time lately.
Yeah. And it's tough too, because seems to be a long lead item to get everything we need done.
Yeah.
So like, don't put yourself in that spot. Like just touch base with all the vendors. Mm-hmm. As soon as you know from an engineering perspective what you need to be looking for in the supply chain, like start putting out feelers.
Yep.
Like see what work you can put onto the vendors. Like, right. We told the camera vendors our field of view and focal point like requirements, and I have no idea what lens they recommend for that. So I let them pick.
Yeah, because they know best. They know the sensor. They know what optic stack they have available to send to us, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But like if they send us something and then we're like, oh, this is not going to work. Now we're back to square one. Yeah. Like there could be a couple iterations here of you think you find a good vendor, you get it in, you realize it's actually not going to work. Now I have to find another vendor, a different product. I have to validate it. I have to test it. I have to get it all. I mean, all of these things, like getting the right stuff in housing, making sure that it's what you need and you can source it and it fits in your cost model is like that's the turkey. That's the thing that you start baking first thing. Yeah. If you can, as soon as engineering allows for that.
A great example of this with cameras before we move on too, is like, I've been working with the camera vendors, a couple different ones for like the last 5 nights. And day one, they all just wanted to send me the stuff immediately and have us review it and tell us what we thought. And it's like, well, I don't want to wait a week in transit for like their best guess of what we need to be wrong.
Right.
It's worth it to spend a couple more days developing the conversation and get them to put the lens and sensor permutation together and show us an image at the required distance that it works right.
Yep.
It shows them how our requirements work, and it shows us what's important in it.
Right.
I don't want to put the wrong thing in the mail and wait for the wrong thing.
Exactly. Pay for the wrong thing, wait a whole week for it. If we can spend 3 days and validate that it's at least pretty likely going to be what we need, we should do that. Yeah. And then we get it in the air. Then we get it in and we can test it and we can do all the stuff that really only we can do for testing and validation.
Yeah. So like if you do as much work as you can, like at the vendor facility before you're waiting on it to like get in the mail. Mm-hmm. It helps a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. It does help a lot.
That's finding vendors and validating the parts. We've said so many other things about this in prior episodes, and I'm sure many of you have heard.
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot. I don't think we've done a full OHM episode about validation. That would be a cool one.
Yeah.
To go into.
For sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sourcing is also the most variable.
Mhm.
Like a lot of other things, I can tell you exactly how long it will take. Like I know I can get like a launch video done in like 6 working days. Like I know that I can do that. But vendors is like, if a vendor blows you off for 4 days and you try and find another one and like maybe they don't have what you need and like the variability is crazy. That probably second only to engineering of like how it's hard to estimate.
Yeah.
And that's why it's good to do it first because it already takes a long time. It's super, super variable. It should be one of the first things you put in the oven.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, it is.
And also it all feed back into like the marketing teams needs to know how much the machine would cost.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like it, costing down. I think we talked about this on a different episode too of like, maybe you pay a little idiot tax on parts just to get your product out the door and then worry about costing it down later. But you can only do that so much. Like if your thing doesn't make money, you need to, come on, like you gotta, there has to be a point to it. So a lot of stuff plays in here. Yeah, how much you charge for the thing is going to be pulled from how much you're paying for your parts and how much you can negotiate down for, a price at a certain price break.
Yeah. These are all the types of things we're actively dealing with and thinking about as we get ready for the next launch.
Yep.
But like, let's say like for us now, we've kicked off every vendor we've needed to, stuff's arriving, and then it's a great segue into validation.
Yep.
Putting like the production version of the machine together, validating that it meets your requirements. So
yep,
we could talk a little bit more about that now.
This one, I think I would direct people towards our episode about writing a PRD or a product requirement document, because the whole point of validating your product is like, does it fulfill the PRD? That is the whole point of doing validation. So based on the PRD, what are all the unit tests you have to run that are required for success? So this is stuff like staying thermally stable over time, a lifetime test on wear and like cycle time, like a longevity, like are rails, gumming up after, 50,000 cycles or whatever it is, making sure that it has lifetime tests. These fall into like unit test category. And then there's functional tests, which is like, can it populate an 0402 PCB? Right. And like that's a functional test. So you have to write out all the things you have in your PRD. Again, whole episode about this. We'll put a link in the episode notes about it. Where you can go listen to that episode. But you got to go and do all these things and make sure it's like solving your customer's problem.
And that's with the mass production parts too.
Yes. This is with the parts you're going to ship. Because if you do this validation on like prototype parts or whatever, it doesn't mean anything because that's not what you're putting out the door.
It can give you a pretty good sense, but it's not necessarily. If you want to sleep soundly, use your production parts.
Yeah, just do it. Get some samples pay the idiot tax, get the parts from your vendor, air shipped at a really small sample quantity just to get them in-house and validate with that. It's so important to do it.
And it saves headache because you don't need to do the work twice.
Yep. Yeah. It's so important. Just for validation tests, I wrote a little Python library that I called Leash, which is a joke on a Formlabs thing. But it's a little Python library that is specifically suited towards connecting to a Lumen and controlling it really easily. It's like you're taking your Lumen for a walk on a leash is kind of the joke. But it's been really handy for just like, I just need to test wear on these cables. Let me run a test where it's going to go, 50,000 cycles of moving these cables. And like it logs that to a database and all that stuff. So it's really handy to have that kind of infrastructure built out. It's fine. A quick and dirty script is great to start, but it's been nice having that. I wrote that for this passive product launch.
Yeah, before we had that, I remember just copy pasting the same line of G code like 20,000 times over and over for a cable lifetime test.
I think we found a website that it's like copy paste X number of times tool or something. And you like paste it in and it gives you like you control A, copy the 20,000 copy.
Yeah.
Such a mess. Yeah. And that worked fine.
Yeah, it was great.
It worked okay. Quick and dirty is okay for this. Your implementation can be quick and dirty as long as your test is accurate. It doesn't matter if your Python script is crappy, as long as the important thing, which is the data real, that needs to be true. But everything else is like, just get it working. Yeah, but this is not optional.
No.
You have to know it does the thing. Another nice thing about this is you can calculate performance of the product at this time too. So for us, CPH is chips per hour. During your validation, you can generate these numbers, which you'll want to put into your marketing material later. But while you're doing this, super, super, super important to get some of these numbers that are important about your product too.
Turns out customers care about that.
Yeah.
So, like,
yes, as they should. And like, it's like a week before, imagine it's like the week before you're launching and you're working on your website and you're like, wait, how fast can it go? And then you have to go and get the thing. You're in the middle of launch prep and you're figuring out these numbers. Do this at validation. Like, this is when it happens, you know, like this validation is also where you try some of these things and you realize it needs tweaks, and you're doing these tweaks to adjust it so you are hitting these targets too. So like software tweaks are happening in here too, so you can, you know, get the optimal value out of it. And you can still do a little bit R&D later, but, you know, most of it's happening here. You're getting it tweaked here. But anyway, so that's mostly validation.
And then there's a fun one that you could consider. We've done it before, which is the beta program.
Yes. I think I think kind of a good barrier here is like, it's good to do this, maybe not necessarily with incremental products, but with new products. I'm trying this on as I say it. I don't know if it's necessarily true, because like I think about Formlabs a lot, and like they do a beta program for every new printer, every single one,
even software updates sometimes.
Yeah. I think there's like a whole beta program where you can sign up for like beta preform and they'll send you that build, which is really cool. But you know, we did a beta for feeders and it was great. It was so good. And like we did kind of a weird version of a beta for like the initial Lumen version, because like we had hundreds of people that had built it already. Like it was like a weird crowdsourced beta, you know?
Yeah. The what you kind of mean there to unpack is like the DIY kit almost felt like selling a developer kit.
No,
like
I mean,
beta.
Before we started selling that,
okay.
We already had hundreds of people who just sourced it themselves and built the design.
Yeah, it's true.
And they gave us a ton of feedback, you know, before we took anyone's money, which is cool.
Yeah.
You know, like
I forgot about that.
If it's a new version of something, it's really good to do it. Like small incremental updates, it's always good to do a beta. Like if you're still a small company, this is a ton of time and resources and money and like all this stuff to get this to happen. It's really worked well for us for doing it when we have like a big new thing coming out. But yeah, it's great. And also if you get a beta user that's super stoked on what you sent them, it's an awesome launch day testimonial. You know, it's a good use case. You can show, hey, look, on launch day, this person was using this thing and it was great. Like, look at their experience. Here's photos of them using it, blah, 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 blah. Like getting it out to somebody and getting all of that like social proof up front for launch day is incredible. It's super, super good to do it. And you're developing around what they want. So this is why we put it here in this order. These are all roughly kind of in order of how when they should start, I think, because you still need to be, you might be changing stuff. Like we changed a ton of stuff about the feeder based on the beta feedback. We made so many changes based on what people told us. So like you still need to keep things flexible when you're doing the beta. Otherwise, like, why are you doing it?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
I guess so. If you did a beta program, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Like hopefully at this point we could talk about like a paradigm where you have all the validated final versions of the parts in. It's actually a great point at which to build up a hero version of the machine.
Yes.
That works like, feels like production candidate of your product.
Yep. Yeah. The hero is like the golden sample is, I think, kind of what that word means. I've seen that used in some things. Like the hero photo is the beautiful product photo that is used in all of the marketing materials and stuff. So you want to build a hero unit of the thing you're going to ship. And this is such a prerequisite for so many other things. So getting this in unblocks so many other tasks for launch. It has to look as almost exactly like what people are going to get, because it's going to be used for visuals for literally every aspect of communicating about the machine. And something that we've learned for sure, like especially with doing docs, is if there are even tiny inconsistencies about what version of the machine, what software looks like in the docs versus what they see on their screen, people throw a flag on the play because they want to make sure they're doing it right. You know, they see something that's like slightly off. They're keeping an eye out for that kind of thing. If it does not look right, you shouldn't use it. For example, we have almost a hero of V4, but we're waiting on the blades that like feeders attached to. The silkscreen color is not right.
Yeah.
And we're waiting on those boards, those PCBs to come in the mail so we can make the blades with the black silkscreen or solder mask, I mean. And because if they're green, people are gonna be like, why are mine not green?
Shouldn't they be green?
Yeah. And like, I don't want a hero photo to have like the wrong color thing. Like you can't do that. So this is a really important one is getting your good hero unit. And it's going to be used for a million things before launch. So yeah, right now, I don't know if you could tell from how I'm talking about it. I'm waiting for those boards to come in, and it's driving me crazy that I can't start on all this hero stuff. So that's where I'm at with this one right now.
You'll be pleased to know they're in the silk screen process as of last night.
Really?
Yeah.
Let's go. Good.
They're
Okay,
probably shipping today.
Cool. That's good. Rock and roll.
Yeah, getting that final version of the machine is so important. Like, it's not worth taking any pictures you intend to show the public of it
Before.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It has to be correct. It has to, if there's a cable that wasn't long enough that you had to splice in a cable extension and it's hidden inside a drag chain, whatever, that's okay. Like, it doesn't have to be nominally the same. It has to visually look the same to the customer, because that's what the customer is going to be looking at.
I'll even say this about the hero too. One of my favorite things to do is package it up as if I think I have it all figured out.
Yeah.
And then like let Steven go into an empty room of no other tools and what the machine comes with and like see if he glitches out. Like, is the bolt kit bag missing something? Or,
Right.
Like, did it go together the way we expect?
Yeah.
Like, it's a great throw it over the wall like validation.
Yep.
Like putting it together. Like, did every part go together right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's the only way to know is to try it.
Mm-hmm.
When I actually first started at Farm Labs, I think it was like my second or third week, and this was before Farm 3 launched. The UX team pulled me into a room and they were like, all right, we're just going to ask you to do a thing and then we're going to watch you do it. And I was like, okay. And they were like, I want you to connect the printer to Wi-Fi. And there was just a Form 3 in a room, and I wasn't allowed to ask any questions because they were just trying to see how naturally I went about doing it. And they just they video recorded me going through trying to connect it to Wi-Fi and see where did I hesitate? Where did I go to the wrong menu? And like trying to understand what that is. Such a cool exercise. Such a great way to test usability. Sometimes we'll do this, or like someone that has never set up a Lumen before, we'll have them go through our docs and audit the docs and make sure that is there anything that was misleading or confusing? Like Mitchell just did this like a week and a half ago. It's a great process to go through. So yeah, that's a great thing to do with the hero.
Mm-hmm. Get some fresh eyes on it.
Yep. And then that leads directly into documentation, which you need the hero for to do any kind of docs, because the best docs have a lot of pictures. You need a hero photo of it. You need a hero unit to take pictures. And like for us, our docs break down pretty neatly into assembly and calibration. So like actually putting together the 7 whatever parts that come in the box. And then how do you set up the software? How do you use it? Blah, 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 blah. Mainly for the first part, like assembly, it needs to look exactly like what they get in the box, or at least very, very, very close. Calibration is a little less important, at least for how our docs are structured, because a lot of it's just screenshots of software and it doesn't actually matter exactly what version of hardware you have for a lot of those instructions. But I'm waiting to start on the assembly docs right now until we get that hero unit built up. And then I can go and take 1,000,001 pictures, build out all the docs there. This is a huge chunk of time. Like I'm expecting this to take me like 3.5, 4 days is usually what it takes to get all these photos taken, list it all out, get it all massaged in MK Docs, find out where it's going to fit on the site, blah, 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 blah.
It's a huge undertaking.
It's huge.
I've seen hardware companies try to do docs development in real time alongside engineering. They're like, they update how you think you may assemble the machine or product, like as it's designed. And like they have proxy docs, like the entire product. And I just think it's wasteful.
Yeah, I think the exact same thing.
I don't want to ask someone to write something that could be nuked at like an engineer's whim.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm sure there's some benefit to it I'm not thinking of, but man, I mean, why spend all that time to do? I mean, it's good to think about those things and think about how would a user assemble this thing? How would a user use this thing? But to write up the assembly docs beforehand is like, that feels like a waste of time.
I've seen it be a way of saving time with technical documentation of software, where like as a feature is added, it's documented. Like tooltips might be made, they might be refined later, but like for hardware, I would not advise it.
Interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting angle. Yeah, I could maybe see it more for software, but I can't quite put my finger on why. Yeah, so this should, in my opinion, this happens after things are decided. It's baked. Like you have the hero.
After the hero photos have been taken, it's probably Steven's favorite part of a product launch.
Yeah, making the video, a launch video, which I think is a super incredibly critical part of announcing hardware. Like you have to make a video. It's so nice to do it. It shows the product in action. It elicits hype. It's big. Video is incredibly shareable and common in like how things work today. You should make a video. You just should do it.
Yeah, it speaks for you.
Yeah,
So
it
you don't
speaks
have to convince everyone yourself.
Yeah, if you try and say, so here's my product and it does X, Y, Z, and like you gotta put a little zhuzh behind it. You gotta wrap up the pill in the metaphorical peanut butter to ship it to you. Have your dog take his meds, right? Like you have to tell the story in a way that also gives someone something cool to watch, where it's like, oh no, this is legitimately getting me stoked and this is exciting. And in the process, they learn about the thing that you're announcing, you know? So yeah, launch video is huge. It's super, super important. There's really two options here, two paths diverging in the woods. The first is you hire a company to make the video for you, or you do it internally. We've done both. For feeders, we hired a company. For all the other ones, we did just me making the video. And guess what? You can tell which one was freaking Steven and which one was a professional production company. We're probably going to do it internal this time, though. It depends, right? Like, I think it was just barely worth it to hire out for it last time.
Yeah. When we hired the video team, I think it ended up costing like $100 per second of video footage, like all said and done.
Yeah, I mean, it's expensive, but it was great.
It freed you up.
It did. And like that video has almost 100,000 views on my channel, which is really good for my channel. I'd rather they see a really nice polished thing. So pretty worth it.
We didn't regret it.
No, we didn't regret it. I think the thing that I think I want more control over what shots we get when we're doing hero capture, because we can get a lot of media for other things too. And also I think I'd want more flexibility in things in the edit. Like if I'm letting someone else edit it, there are some things I probably would have changed or like went back to go reshoot that I didn't really have an opportunity to do here, because like we had a day where like they came through and we shot and that was it. And like we had to have our list there. But like I really like saying, no, I'm just going to take like 2.5 days, and I'm just going to see what feels good and what looks great and like come up with ideas as I shoot and just be a little more creative with it and get way more stuff. You also had to pay more to keep all the raw footage. So we kind of just got this finished thing, but I like wanted all the B-roll, and that was way more money. And like, it was a whole other thing. So I think there's a lot there. What I could see us doing is like, I do all the shooting and then we hire an editor, or we hire like a visual graphics, like design artist or something like that to add the zhuzh on top, but we still get the footage. I'm kind of getting into what we're thinking about doing, but this depends greatly on your videography skill and your budget. Mm-hmm. If you don't have any money to hire a production company, that's fine. Do the best you got. If you're really good at videography, screw the production company. Do your thing. If you're me and it's kind of half on both, it's kind of up in the air. We could afford a production company, and I'm all right at video. Where we could do either one.
And the latest iPhone can take a crazy good video, and you can buy a stabilizer on Amazon for like $50.
Yeah.
The barrier to entry is pretty low.
Yeah, it's crazy low. And CapCut is an incredible piece of video editing software that runs on your phone. It's great. I think they have a web version too. Like you don't need a crazy software suite. Like there's free editors out there. Use iMovie. It's awesome.
It's fun. And like even at the other end of it too, like all film equipment can be rented for not that much.
Yeah.
It's very economical to rent.
Yeah. You can get a
sliders,
$40,000 rig that's on your shoulder for like, a couple $100 a day. And if you're going to do it for 2 days, you have to shoot with a $40,000 camera setup for like $400.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. There's a reason a lot of like shows and production companies rent and they don't buy their cameras. So you got a lot of options there.
And we're still deciding what we want to do here, but that's like a peek into how we think about it.
Yeah, exactly. And like, if you're already shooting, even if you're going to hire a production company, I recommend putting into the scope of what you're going to have them shoot is getting a lot of great B-roll of it in operation. Because like something that we saw is like a lot of people have asked us for, I just want footage of it running, which, is really funny because like I've watched the Lumen run for like so many hundreds of hours. It's like, well, who wants to just stare at this thing running? People want to see it do the thing. And we didn't do this for the longest time. It was just footage of like cool bangers, like awesome, like quick, snappy videos. But they're just like, no, I just want to watch like a 30-minute video or something of it, like running a job. That's what people wanted. So, getting some of like the in operation footage is really nice too for when you're doing this, that you can use for stuff beyond launch, like social media stuff, like get a lot of stuff while you're doing this.
Yeah, what's that like media asset vault that you and Mitchell run?
We were thinking about setting up like it's called a DAM, a digital asset management software. It didn't really make a lot of sense. We kind of like looked into it, and it was money, and like they make sense for really large organizations. Like Google Drive is pretty fine for what we need. Formlabs had a whole DAM for all their media, and it was incredible. You could search by resin type, and it would bring up all the photos, anything tagged with that kind of resin. So if like you were making a blog post about like Tough V5 or whatever, you could just search that, and all photos ever taken by anybody at Formlabs and approved for use were there and ready to go. It's really cool.
Yeah.
So when we have more of a media arm, we will probably dive into that. But for now, Google Drive totally does the job.
Yeah, I brought it up because you're like using the launch video as a way of like filling up a repository like that, or if it's just a Google Drive, like folders for given products. Like it's just a great time and chance to do that while you're thinking about it. It'll save you a lot of time for subsequent activities like website updates and like blog posts and all that. Yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah, think if there's any like little clips. Great examples with our feeder. We wanted to have a little GIF of it feeding 0402 parts with a call out of it saying feeds 0402 or like, supports 0402 or whatever. And having an explicit thing where during launch, we want that to be on the product page on launch day. We should do that when we're shooting the launch video. We should get that clip too of the feeder doing that little thing we want the GIF of. We ended up ripping it from the launch video because we didn't plan ahead. And it's fine. But, if there's specific things that you want ahead of time, bulk it in. Take a few days and just do what you got to do to get this video together and get all the other B-roll while you're doing it. Might as well add some stuff in.
Yeah. No, it's all really good stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
So like launch video is a very externally important task. But if we look back and like think more internally about the company itself, we need to get the QC processes in order for like the new product, the product update, whichever you are thinking about here. For us, it's the uprev from V3 to V4. So we have to do a full audit of all of our existing QC about the Lumen and look deeply into what needs to change, what can stay the same, what's great is what can we recycle. Yeah. But it's a full deep dive into revisiting it all.
Yep. I think, is there maybe a few parts that weren't touched from V3 to V4? Almost every part is new. I think there's a couple exceptions.
If I had to guess, I touched like 70% of the 3D models, probably more.
Right. So like a lot of stuff is going to be obviated here. Like a lot of stuff is going to be different.
Yeah. And it's sometimes like I was just thinking about this for the Y gantry. It's basically the same QC process, but I added 2 M5 square nuts per side. So like now I just need to add a check for that.
Right.
Yep. But it's every little decision like that. It's a death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah, there's so many of these little things. All our QC checklists need to be fully audited again.
Yeah, and maybe I even need to make these QC processes like exist for the old version of the machine and the new one at the same time. Like,
right. That's true. That's a good point.
Like, depending on how you might want to change over, like you might need to be able to make both versions.
Yeah.
So that's a whole other thing for a different conversation. But
yeah.
Like QC is a big one here. There's jigs, there's software, and sure, it's a lot easier when adapting from one thing to another. But if there's a new assembly that needs a whole new QC fixture, you need to take time to go make that.
Yes, we're getting this new version of the machine's going to have a whole new motherboard.
Yeah,
we got to make sure it's doing effectively the same thing, but it is an entirely different shape. It has a different pinout. It's like we still need to be checking that. There's a great line of Bunny Huang, cool dude. He has a line of like, your test jig is the second product behind your actual product. Like every product that you make, you actually make 2. You make the thing you ship, and you make all the QC jigs and processes that check that thing. Like you're actually doing twice as much there. He has some great blog posts. We'll put a link in the show notes about some of he has a great blog post about making jigs and stuff. But yeah, it takes a lot of time. So making all of those, and like we have internal test software that we wrote to test all of our hardware. We got to update those tests. We got to change them. I just, finished this, a few days ago.
Yeah.
All that gets got to be updated.
We have a mentality here of like everyone on the line should have assurance that they made the right thing through our jigs and testing suites. So we don't want to half-ass this. It needs to be ready and in place for the first batch of a new product.
Yep. Yeah. Nothing can be ambiguous. It has to be critically clear if something is correct. Otherwise, we are not doing our job to the folks on the line. We have to make sure that they they can be confident that they're building it right. Otherwise, what are we even doing? Like, we have to for them to know definitively if it's correct and give them the processes to do that.
Yeah, like Steven was able to go to an important offsite meeting during like the first week of feature production because the test jig was a mini Steven, like looking at each and every feature, making sure it was appropriate.
Right. Yep. Yeah. As much as you can pack down your eyeballs into, your perception of what's good into a little automated brain, a little jig, a little process, the better.
Yeah. All right. I think we're at a good point to wrap. That's it for this one. Thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget to leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps us out a ton. Part 2 will come out in a couple of weeks. You can find Opulo on Twitter and Instagram. And please also remember you can email us at podcast@opulo.io with your questions or comments on the episode. And for those listening who have already emailed us, thank you so much. We really appreciate the messages, the suggestions, the comments. It's really awesome to hear from y'all. Keep it coming. Please don't forget to check out opulo.io and sign up for our newsletter where we write blog posts and do customer interviews with other folks building open hardware. That's it. We'll see you in the next one.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya. Jerry rig everything snap.
Great.